Hello, you are watching Talking Europe. I'm France 24's Europe editor, Catherine Nicholson. With me in the studio for this programme, France's newly appointed Secretary of State for European Affairs, Clément Beaune. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
Well, we're going to start off by talking about the pandemic. The European Centre for Disease Control says we're at the same level of infections as in March. Should our viewers and people in France be preparing for another lockdown?
No, we don't want to have any general lockdown as the one we had not only in France, actually in a lot of places across Europe during last spring. We certainly want to avoid this, and we are working hard, not only in France, but in this country in particular, to avoid such a situation. Because for people, for our economy, for our life, it would be, I think, a disaster. So you're right. We are experiencing an increase in the figures of the pandemic. We are not in the situation of last spring, because if you look at all the indicators, in particular the number of people in hospital, it's certainly not the same. And the big difference is that we are all, and in France we are putting a lot of effort on this, better prepared, better organized. We know this virus a bit better to make sure that whenever there is a problem, whenever there is an issue somewhere, we are acting quickly in a targeted manner to limit the propagation of the virus.
Well, looking at one of the EU's closest neighbours, the United Kingdom, no longer a member, of course, since January 31st, there's a quarantine there, mandatory quarantine for arrivals from France. Are you working on trying to convince Boris Johnson to get rid of this quarantine?
We are unhappy with this decision. We are, to be frank, unhappy with the method, because we were informed by the United Kingdom very close to the actual implementation of the decision. And the whole territory of France has been put in red implementing a quarantine for...
The British government says it's based on scientific figures, infection rates, which have been rising.
Which is true, but if we want to cooperate better, we need also this differentiation, having the same criteria, but trying to target the zones, which are, in some cases, we do acknowledge it for Paris, for instance, for the region of Marseille. There is a high circulation of the virus, but targeting the whole country is not really targeted, actually. So we think it's not the appropriate decision. That said, we are discussing with the UK government, obviously, my colleague for transport, myself, the president, and we do hope, but it all depends on the UK, to stop this quarantine measure, which we don't think is very effective, to be frank.
Well, let's stick with the UK. Your colleague Jean-Yves Le Drian, the French foreign minister, he said recently that negotiations on Brexit are not advancing. And he said, due to the intransigent and frankly unrealistic attitude of the United Kingdom, quite stinging words there towards Westminster. So can you tell us, what does Paris want from London?
We want to stick to a very simple principle that we've been repeating, not only Paris, I think EU in general. Michel Barnier is a negotiator on all countries, Germany and so on. It's a sovereign decision from the UK to leave the EU. I don't think it's a good decision, my personal vision, but that's a democratic choice that we do respect and we have to respect. But when you leave, you have consequences. You cannot ask basically for full access to the single market, to the EU market, and not have what we call level playing fields, which means basic rules of fair competition to comply with. Otherwise,
Boris Johnson said that it could be quite simple. He's talked about a Canada Plus deal, similar conditions to what Canada has, but a little bit better because there's a closer neighbour involved.
No, but it's very interesting because Canada type agreement is a type of agreement, but Canada, as far as I know, is not the UK, and we have 10 times more trade between the EU and the UK than we have with Canada. So of course it's not the same impact, and it's very good because we are neighbors, so it's normal. But the economic relation cannot be the same. And we do respect the request from the UK to be in a type of Canada agreement, but it's a Canada-like agreement, which means, okay, not exactly belonging to the single market, but at the same time the UK is asking for much more than what Canada has. And if the UK wants that, fine, we can look at it, but it means respecting the EU rules. That's as simple as this.
Well, two particular stumbling blocks at the moment believed to be the issue of state aid rules and also fishing rights, access to British fishing waters and quotas. Is the French government prepared to give Michel Barnier, the negotiator, more flexibility on these areas to make more compromises?
No, that's not what we want, and that's not what we think. We have a clear mandate on both sides. Michel Barnier's mandate has been agreed by all 27. It will not change because it's also based on a political declaration that last year both the UK government, Boris Johnson himself, and the EU authorities, all 27 member states, have agreed. And we are not asking for more than this. We're asking to be in line with this political declaration.
So the compromise for you has to come on the British side?
I mean, we are ready to discuss some parameters, but we have to be clear on this basic principle that I was mentioning and recalling, that if you want big, large, full access to the single market, you need the level of competition respecting our rules that is adequate with this access. That's it.
What do you think is the likelihood of no deal at this point?
It is a high risk, I must say. We do not want no deal, and we are not pushing for no deal. That's very clear, and it's not a diplomatic comment. It is what we think. But we will not accept, because I think it's worse than a no deal, to have large access to the market with no level playing field. That's clear. We are negotiating to avoid the no deal. We still have time to find an agreement on the principles I was mentioning. Now it's the UK to move. And if we have a no deal, we have to prepare for that, because, as I said, there is a risk. And we will accelerate in the very next days on the French side and in coordination with our European partners, EU partners, the preparation in case of a no deal.
Let's talk about another foreign affairs matter, the case of Alexei Navalny, the prominent critic of Vladimir Putin, who's in hospital in Germany after German authorities say he was poisoned with a Novichok nerve agent. There is talk of sanctions going around. Would Paris be in favour?
All options are open, and we are discussing it because we will make any decision will be coordinated with our EU partners, and we are discussing, for instance, with Germany in particular. What we said and what Jean-Yves Le Drian, Foreign Secretary, said very clearly last week already, and yesterday, the day before the announcement was made again, is that it's a criminal act. We need a clear inquiry and full transparency on what has been done.
Do you believe that the Russian state was responsible?
It's not for me to qualify because it's too early, but we have concerns and we need to know, because obviously Mr. Navalny is not anyone. He's a political opponent and a first high-profile political figure in Russia. So it's not for me to say what the results of the inquiry have to be, but we need this clarity because it's an extremely serious criminal act. And the poison you mentioned has been used before. So we need to know exactly what has happened. And what Chancellor Merkel, what Jean-Yves Le Drian said, what France has said very clearly, is that it's a clear targeted criminal act that needs to be clarified and maybe sanctioned.
Well, just speaking of sanctions, there has also been the 3 Baltic states of the EU that imposed their own sanctions against Belarus over the crackdown on political opponents of the president there. The Lithuanian foreign minister has argued that the EU's credibility is at stake if the EU as a whole continues to not impose sanctions or act when it's speaking out this strongly against third countries. Would you agree? Is the EU losing its credibility right now?
No, I don't think it's losing its credibility, but I think EU credibility is at stake. That's exactly why, starting on August 14th, France and other EU countries have been very clear, we need sanctions. And we have taken this political decision at the leaders' level, end of August. Now we are listing the targets of the sanctions because we do not want to have an impact on the whole population and people of Belarus, but we are targeting people from the regime which are attacking and repressing. And we are making this list now. We want this list to be credible, so not to be too small. And the Baltic countries have acted in anticipation, if I may say, but there will be EU sanctions, and we work in this EU framework. It will happen in the very next days.
Just got time for a word about the European Union recovery plan from coronavirus. There's this huge recovery plan worth 750 billion euros. However, it does involve trade-offs with the next 7 years of the EU's budget. The European Parliament is furious, if I may say so, that there's going to be less money over the next 7 years, according to the proposal. Are there false economies going on here, reducing budgets on, for example, the transition away from carbon emissions, the scientific research budgets being slashed?
No, I really don't think, and I think it's reality, there's no trade-off. There's not been any trade-off between the recovery plan and the EU budget.
Well, the Just Transition Fund for the transition away from carbon economies has been slashed by 60%.
No, it depends on with what you compare. But if you compare with what we had on the table in February, when we had the first summit on the budget, and if you compare with what was existing before the July summit, all policies are increasing, including the climate policy and the Just Transition Fund, boosted by the recovery plan. What the Parliament is saying, and I do share this politically, is that we could have done more. We could have been, and we should have been maybe more ambitious on the EU budget. But if you take Erasmus, if you take research, innovation, all policies are significantly increasing in comparison with the current budget, which is very important. It's not the case in all national budgets. So we have not taken money out of the EU budget for the recovery plan. We have really added the two. Can we go further? I think now it's difficult to reopen everything because we need to go fast. But the Parliament is mentioning some issues which are extremely important. For instance, creating new resources for the EU budget, digital taxation, for instance. We are very much in favor of this as for France.
And a new plastics tax?
A new plastic tax, which is on the table already, but we can go further. And if the Parliament is putting more pressure to have quicker, faster, and more ambitious new resources like this digital tax or carbon tax at the EU borders, we are very much pushing in the same direction.
All right, Clément Beaune, French Secretary of State for European Affairs, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to you for watching Talking Europe as well. Hope to see you again next time.
How do artists and writers see the world? France 24's culture show takes you beyond the headlines, to the crossroads where the arts meet the news, and engage with what's happening in our lives today.
Encore, presented by Eve Jackson on France 24 and France24.com.